Hey guys, and welcome back to another video. Today we're talking about all the spooky books that I would recommend to you. Today I'm going to share with you all of my recommendations for the spooky season. If that are thrillers or horror books or anything spooky, anything that's like a murder mystery, all of those books will be covered in this video. I have gone through pretty much every single thriller, horror, mystery novel I've read, and I've selected my favorites from the past years. These are books that I've read since like 2018, and I've gone through every single one and I've selected the best of the best. Now, this was actually quite hard because not all of these are necessarily 5 stars. There are a couple of like 4 stars in here, but they are books that I would genuinely recommend, and they are books that I think are really worthy to read. And since it's currently October, this is the best time to present them to you. I've tried to categorize them into different categories. So we've got cozy mysteries, thrillers, YA thrillers or YA mysteries, and horrors. The reason I didn't do any like fantasy is because I don't read fantasy a lot, so I didn't have anything particular to share with you, but I will cover all of the bases on thrillers and horrors and YAs and everything else. So stay here if you fancy some of those books. Okay, let's first start with cozy mysteries. I have been obsessed with cozy mysteries. Basically, it's a genre that's similar to thrillers, but it's more about reading like a good murder mystery and not necessarily being scared or spooked. So usually these are set in small towns or remote settings, maybe like a mansion or something, and there's usually one person that takes on the role as detective. This could either be a real detective or not, and that person has to find the murderer or the person who did something bad. And my favorite one of those is The 7 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle. This is incredible. This even has a little bit of a fantasy twist because in this book we follow like a big party at this mansion, and at this party the daughter of the hosts dies. So Evelyn Hardcastle dies, and we follow a character who wakes up in a different party guest's body every day. And every day he gets like a new chance to relive this murder to find out who did it. And every day he wakes up in a new body, and we follow another kind of like the same spirit, the same like person, but in a different character's body to figure out what this particular character could observe or know himself, or, you know, just like see on that day that helps us uncover this murder. I think that was such a unique concept and really fun. It's so cool because every character that we spend like a day with, you'd think it's so easy if you wake up in a different character's body every day to find out who committed a murder. But it's actually really hard because some of these might be disabled and like unable to walk. Others of these characters might have like such own secrets or their own like storylines that they are after. So yeah, it was so unique, so well done, and honestly I need to reread this because I read this a couple of years ago and I've already forgotten a lot about the ending, but I know that it was so good. Pretty sure I gave this 5 stars, and yeah, would really recommend The 7 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle. Another cozy mystery that I read a couple of years ago was The Thursday Murder Club by Richard Osman. I unfortunately have given the copy of the first book to one of my friends, so this is the second book, but imagine if this was read and set The Thursday Murder Club on it. But yeah, this is by Richard Osman and I loved this. This is a very, well, the whole series is a very British murder mystery, cozy mystery that is set in a retirement home. And in this retirement home, there's this group of retired people who meet up every Thursday to solve unsolved cases, unsolved murders. They look at old like newspaper articles, old cases, and try to uncover them. Until one day, the director of their retirement home is killed himself. And then they have to figure out who that was. So they have an actual real murder to investigate. They team up with like the actual detective working on that case, and it's so much fun. The characters are so sweet. Like genuinely, some of my favorite characters I've ever read were in this book series, and this is actually on my October TBR, so hopefully I will be getting to book 2 in this series very, very soon. But book 1 is definitely a massive recommendation. And the third and final cozy mystery that I want to recommend to you guys is The Three Dahlias by Katie Watson. I recently read this just a couple weeks ago on Kindle because I got this for like 99 cents a couple months ago. Wasn't really expecting much, but this was actually so much fun. It is about these 3 actresses who've all played the role of Detective Dahlia in one of the book adaptations of this iconic like cozy mystery novel about the detective Dahlia. And now there is a convention happening at the house or like the mansion of the author of that book series. So tons of fans of Dahlia coming to this convention, and also all 3 of the actresses are invited to be at this convention, be kind of like the star guests there. However, they're not there for long when suddenly people start dying or disappearing and mysterious things start happening, and all 3 Dahlias are suddenly blackmailed, and they team up and to solve this murder, to solve this case, find out who blackmails them. And it's honestly so fun. It's also a series, so I'm really excited to continue it and read the other books in this series. But I had so much fun reading this book. It was so genuinely fun and cozy, and also just really twisted and the perfect murder mystery. I don't know, I found it was so cool. The ending was a tiny bit of a letdown. I kind of saw it coming, so this was only a 4-star for me and not a 5-star. But honestly, the atmosphere, the characters, the overall story and the setting had me from the first page. Like, I was so hooked and I had such a good time reading it, and it was so memorable and has really stayed on my mind since I read it. So I would definitely recommend The Three Dahlias. On that note, let's next do the YA mysteries or YA thrillers that I have for you. I would say these are kind of similar to the cozy mysteries because these aren't like that scary, but I enjoyed all of these really, really thoroughly, so here they are. The first one is Truly Devious by Maureen Johnson. This is so good. This is also a series, so there's 3 books in the original trilogy, and then there's I think a couple of spin-offs, I think 1 or 2. And this is so good. I read this during 2020 during COVID, and I was so hooked, honestly, on the series. I loved it. I associate this so much with like being such a comfort series. So in this book series we follow Stevie, and Stevie goes to Ellingham Academy. Ellingham Academy is this really remote, small, but like boarding school academy type that only accepts really exceptional students, and it is there to further their talents. So they all have like a special talent, a special interest. They're all incredibly unique children, teenagers, and their talents are being furthered at Ellingham Academy. And Stevie's special interest or like special talent is actually solving murders and solving cases. And at Ellingham Academy, there has been like an iconic big murder case that was never solved about the founder of this academy and his family, because his, I believe, wife and daughter were murdered, and it was never solved what happened. So she goes to this academy to solve that murder. But during the time that she is at the academy and working on this case, other murders start happening on campus, and she's on her toes to solve all of them, because her friends start like dying, and people also start sending like threat letters, like blackmail and stuff. So she has to be on it and on this case to solve it. And I remember just loving this so much. It's set in like dual timelines, so you get some chapters about back in the day when the original murders happened, but most of it is about present day. And both timelines were incredible. I really enjoyed both timelines a lot. And yeah, I just had such a good time with this. I really loved this so much, and I I can't recommend this enough. I honestly have to give this series a reread because it was one of my favorites back in the day. On the same note, another series that I read in like 2019, 2020 and that I love so much is A Good Girl's Guide to Murder by Holly Jackson. I feel like I don't have to say a lot about this because this is incredibly popular on BookTok, but this is a YA murder mystery series, or like thriller. So in this book we follow Pippa, and Pippa, for a school project, decides to look at a murder that happened in her town, the case of Andy Bell. Andy Bell was this like popular girl, and apparently she got killed by her boyfriend. However, Pippa doesn't believe that. Pippa is thinking that that was too easy and that solution doesn't make sense. Like, the boyfriend is not guilty, according to Pippa. So she takes it upon herself to find the real person who killed Andy Bell, and she wants to solve the case. She wants to clear up what really happened, and she wants to prevent this innocent man from sitting in jail. So, this was just so good. I honestly loved this series so much. I think the first 2 books 5 stars, and then the 3rd book I didn't love as much, but people really praised this series, and it's so true. Like, this is so good. I could highly recommend this, and if you for some reason haven't read this yet, you should. What are you doing? This is incredible. This series is so good, and honestly I think the best thing about this series is the characters, because they feel so real, so relatable, so fun, and it's just so well written, especially for a YA. Like, I read this when I was an adult and I really enjoyed it. And the final YA book that I want to recommend is Stalking Jack the Ripper by Carrie Maniscalco. Honestly, this series has been around forever. The series has been around since like 2016, 2017, I think, and it has been on my radar ever since that time. But for some reason, I only managed to read this like this year. I read the first book I think last fall, and then I've been reading the rest of the series over the course of 2024, and honestly it's so fucking good. This is incredible. In this book we follow our main character Audrey Rose, and her uncle is, what's it called, a coroner, I think, in English. So he looks at dead bodies and he investigates dead bodies, and she is his kind of like apprentice. So she is learning to also dissect bodies and solve crimes. And this is set obviously during the time of Jack the Ripper in London. So he is going around killing women, leaving his victims on the streets, and they all get brought to Audrey Rose's uncle to investigate. So Audrey Rose decides that she's going to help with the case, obviously. So she starts to investigate the killings of Jack the Ripper. This is so good. Honestly, this is actually so scary. Like, parts of this are really fucking scary, and I think considering this is a YA book, like, that's pretty scary for YA. But I had such a good time reading this series. I fell in love with the characters. Again, I don't know why these YA books just manage to write such perfect characters, but I fell in love. Like, Audrey Rose is such a good main character, and the love interest in the series, Thomas Cresswell, one of my favorite book boyfriends. Like, genuinely, I'm so obsessed with this series. So if you haven't read this yet, and maybe it's like slipped off your radar because it's already been out for like so long, definitely put this on your radar, because I had such a good time with it, and I think October is the perfect time to read it because it's spooky, it's about Jack the Ripper. All of the books are about like different like historical murderers. So the first one is about Jack the Ripper, the second one is about Dracula, the third one is I think about Harry Houdini. So yeah, I'm just obsessed with the series, and I actually need to read the 4th book and the final book, but I'm kind of saving it for myself because I don't want the series to end because I'm loving it so much. Okay, the next category I want to share with you is horror. Now, I won't lie, I don't read a fuck ton of horror, and I also never know where the line is between a thriller and a horror. I find it quite hard to separate the genres because to me they kind of blend into each other. But I have one author that I love her thriller books, and that is Silvia Moreno Garcia. So I here have Mexican Gothic and Silver Nitrate. These are the two books by her that I have read so far, and both of these were 5 stars. Both of these were incredible. So Mexican Gothic is this, I don't know if I could call it a fantasy or not, but it's this kind of paranormal book. It is set in the mountains in around Mexico City, so the mountains in Mexico, in this mansion, and we follow a character who I believe marries into this like rich family living in the mansion, but as soon as she moves there, she starts seeing things. She starts having like visions, hallucinations, like she starts being creeped out, and she believes this place is like haunted. Excuse me? Okay, so the house starts freaking her the fuck out, and the entire family that lives there is so creepy. Honestly, this book scared the shit out of me. I was properly frightened when I read this, and I honestly cannot recommend this enough. This is so unique. Like, I read this, I think in like 2020 or so, definitely a couple of years ago, and I still to this day remember so many details about this book and so much of the atmosphere because it's so atmospheric. This book is so well written and so well crafted. The atmosphere has stayed with me for like the last 4 years. I recommend this book to anyone who wants like a good thriller. So I would definitely recommend this book to anyone who wants a good horror and who wants to be spooked this Halloween, because I guarantee you, if you read this, you will be frightened. So scared. I can't stress that enough. So definitely go pick this up. And the other book is Silver Nitrate. This is also set in Mexico, but in like the 90s, and it's about the film industry. So in this we follow an audio engineer for movies and her best friend who's an actor, and they stumble upon this unfinished film. So this film that has been kind of lost media and that has never been finished, and they want to kind of like solve this mystery of this unfinished film. So they go find the director of that movie, and he tells them that the film is haunted. He tells them that this unfinished movie is fucking haunted, and suddenly creepy shit starts to happen to them, and they believe that this fucking curse on this film has kind of gone over to them, and now they're cursed because they uncovered this like mystery. This was also properly scary. I would say a little bit less scary than Mexican Gothic, but like fucking frightening enough. Like this was scary. I read this, I believe earlier this year. Did I read this at the beginning of the year? I think so. And I really enjoyed this. I had such a good time with it, and I really, yeah, I liked it. I liked it a lot. I would definitely recommend this if you're still looking for a horror to read this season. I think this is a great one to pick up. Okay, and last but not least, we are going to talk about my favorite thrillers. Now, I usually read most of my thrillers on ebook because they are books that I'm like never sure if gonna want to reread them, and I read so many bad thrillers as well as good ones, so I don't really want to get all of them in like physical copies because they would just take up so much space on my bookshelf, and like half of them I wouldn't like anyway because thrillers are very hit or miss. But these are the ones that I would highly recommend, and just because I don't have physical copies of them doesn't mean that they're bad at all. I just haven't gotten around to like purchasing physical copies of these yet. But the first one I want to talk about is obviously No Exit by Taylor Adams. This is incredible. I love No Exit. This is the best thriller, the scariest thriller, the most gripping thriller I've ever read. In this book we follow our main character. She is driving home from university, I believe for like either Thanksgiving or Christmas, and she gets stuck in a snowstorm, and she ends up stuck at this like service station, kind of like rest place off the highway, with a couple of other people who've had the same idea, and they're all crowded in this small like one room rest stop off the highway, and she goes to like back to her car to check on something in her car, and walking past one of the other cars parked, she sees that there's a child kidnapped inside of it. What she doesn't know is who this car belongs to and what the fuck, how the fuck she's going to save that child and save herself. So it's insane. This book is so good because you are there stuck with these people in the snow. There's no phone service, there's no way to get away, and there's a kidnapped child. And now she has to act and she has to figure out what to do in this situation and how to figure out who kidnapped that child and how to save it. Honestly, this book was incredible. I want to reread this already. Like, I only read this last year and I already want to reread it because it was so good and so scary. I'm obsessed. Yeah. If you haven't read No Exit yet, I know it's also one of those like staple thrillers that everyone's read, but if you haven't read it yet, please read it. It's so good. Okay, the next book, or books overall, are from my favorite thriller author, and that is Riley Sager. So overall, I would recommend most of Riley Sager's books if you haven't read any yet. I think I've read like 4 or 5 of his books by now, but my favorite so far has been Home Before Dark. Sorry, why? I don't know why the screen's so dark. Home Before Dark is my favorite Riley Sager, and this is about a house that is, well, obviously haunted. And in this book series, we follow a family that used to live in like a haunted house, and now it's a couple of years later. I think her parents have died, and the main character comes back to this house to kind of do it up and like sell it. But she isn't sure if what she experienced as a child in this haunted house did actually happen, or if maybe her family just kind of made it up. So she goes back to the house to kind of like re-explore it, figure out if it's haunted or not, and then ultimately like sell it. But as soon as she comes back there, creepy things start happening and the past kind of comes back to catch up with her. And this was so good. This was also just incredibly scary. Like, I literally remember not being able to sleep because I was so scared of this. This is one of those staple thrillers that I recommend to all of my friends. I think it's a perfect blend of a thriller and a haunted house, like paranormal story, because the entire time you're not really sure if this house is actually haunted or if there will be like a rational explanation for it. And that's what I really like about Riley Sager, is that a lot of his books make you really frightened, but they also could all have like a non-supernatural ending, so you never really know what you're in for. And I love that about Riley Sager. I think he writes incredible thrillers. The other Riley Sager I just want to give an honorable mention to is The Only One Left. This was his, I think, 2023 release. I think I read this last year and I really enjoyed this. Again, this is kind of like a haunted house story. So in this we follow a young girl called Kit, and she is a like nurse or like a social worker who works with like disabled people, elderly people, and so on. And after losing her previous job, she is now offered a position in the house of a murderer. So she is meant to take care of this woman called Lenora Hope, I think, who apparently back in the day killed her entire family. So she goes to work for this alleged murderer, and yeah, things start to go wrong from there. There's always so many options for how Riley Sager's books could end, and I think that's what I like about his books. I would also really recommend Final Girls by him and Middle of the Night. That was his like newest release. I read this a couple of weeks ago and also really loved it. But honestly, anything Riley Sager is a go. Another really good thriller that I read a little while ago was Shiver by Ellie Reynolds. I also read this one a couple years ago and I really enjoyed it. This is about a group of friends who get these invites to go to like a ski resort, like an exclusive ski resort. It's only going to be them, and they kind of fell out of touch after one person in their friend group disappeared, and now they get these mysterious invites and they all choose to go back and like reunite in this ski resort. But what they don't know is they go there and then suddenly everything goes wrong and they realize that they are there because someone has invited them there to solve this disappearance. So someone has lured them into the mountains to an abandoned, like, empty ski resort to figure out which one of them is responsible for the disappearance of their friend. It's also set in like dual timelines, so there's the present day where they're all at this ski resort being like blackmailed and, you know, kept in a remote location to figure out which of them is responsible for the disappearance. The other half is set back in the day when they were friends around the time of this disappearance and kind of the days like leading up to it. I remember loving this. I was so shocked by the ending. I genuinely did not see it coming in the slightest. And yeah, I just love this. I think it was so well written. Honestly, I liked one timeline a lot more than the other, but overall it was still such a unique concept. It also involved a lot of like skiing and snowboarding specifically, which I really, really, really enjoyed. So it was kind of like just like a unique, fun concept, and you could really tell that the author knew a lot about the sport that she was writing about. I've just never read a thriller that was also so much about like a sport before, and I think it was so well done and so well written. So Shiver is definitely a top recommendation. And my last thriller recommendation for today is going to be The Kind Worth Killing by Peter Swanson. I've spoken about this one on the channel before, but this is an incredible thriller about this man and a woman. They meet on a plane. He starts telling her about how his wife is having an affair, and he low-key wants to kill her. And then this woman who is just randomly met on a plane is like, so do it, go for it, I'll help you. So they start plotting this murder of the man's wife, and no one is ever going to suspect that they were responsible for it, because no one knows that they know each other. Like, they are the perfect accomplices because no one knows that there's a connection between them. So they team up, they want to kill this wife, and everything just starts happening from then on. Like, this is incredible, and honestly, if you haven't read this yet, I will honestly urge you to do so because it's good. It's incredible. Yeah, that was it. Those were all of my spooky book recommendations. I feel like I've spoken for ages. I definitely need to edit a lot out because I rambled so much. But yeah, those are all of my recommendations for spooky season. I hope there were maybe a couple of books in here that you haven't read yet and that you feel inspired to pick up now. I've done my best to collect like the best of the best. I would recommend every single book in this video, and I hope you found some new books to add to your TBR. And yeah, thank you so much for watching. I will see you very, very soon with a new video, and until then, I'll see ya. Bye bye!